now that we're getting our first reviews on my forthcoming book, which is called The Devil You Know, a Black Power Manifesto, comes out January 26th. We're getting our first reviews. We have review copies out. We have mailings out. And you know, some of the reviews have come in. It is now, I think, safe to discuss in more detail what this book is about. This book is really about a plan for Black people to assume power in America constitutionally. There are a couple of facts you need to remember. At the end of the Civil War, several states in the South were majority Black. Not only having majority Black people, but in the first elections after that, having the majority Black voters. Mississippi, the majority of the people who were registered to vote in Mississippi were Black people, right? So some of that was people, former members of the Confederacy refusing to participate in the post Civil War government, whatever the case. Black people have to vote. Mississippi produces our first 2 Black senators. Mississippi is basically the Black power vanguard in America at that moment. People move from the North to the South to be part of what is happening in Mississippi, right? So you have that. There are 3 other states that are within 4 percentage points of being majority Black. So if Black people had not migrated as part of the Great Migration, and I understand why they did, makes total sense to me, but if they had not done it, and the Civil Rights Act had still passed, and the Voting Rights Act had still passed, Black people would right now control as many as 14 American senators. Right now, at this point, Black people have never popularly elected a senator ever, or been the majority, meaning they were the majority of the coalition that brought that person to power, or they were the major stake in that, meaning the plurality of the people who brought that person to power. Now that could change in Georgia with Warnock. That could change. It's a long shot, but right now it doesn't change. We have 3 Black senators in the U.S. in the Senate right now. All of them were elected by white people, meaning white people were the plurality of the coalition that brought them to power. Now, in theory, that's not a big issue, but in practice, people are most beholden to the people who place them in power. You know, there are now 7 states where the white population is 90% or more of the population. 7 states. They make up 15% of all senators in the country. They have no responsibility whatsoever to anyone who is not white. Now, maybe they will vote in ways that are more egalitarian. I don't know. But that is not their responsibility. Black people, there are 42 million of you in America. That is 4 times the combined population of all those 7 states that are 90% white. And yet you have not a single senator that you have elected. You don't control a single state. You look forward to 2055. I think 7 of the southwestern states will be majority Hispanic, not majority minority, majority Hispanic. If they choose, they will have a region of the country that they can literally control, sending senators that are beholden to their interests, as they should. Hawaii has always been and will continue to be majority Asian South Pacific Islander. The region from Washington and Oregon down into the Rocky Mountain states will continue to be majority white. Many of the states on the east coast and east of the country, including the Midwest, will be some variation of maybe majority minority, but a plurality white. Not a single state is projected to be majority black. Black people have to decide whether you want power or not. I've listened to my entire life people talk about black power and assumption of black power and what we're going to do and the revolution is coming without an actual plan other than to pressure white people to recognize your humanity or beg them to recognize your humanity. And I am saying, skip all that. Stop pleading. Stop begging. These southern states, all the way from Louisiana, in some cases all the way up to Delaware, they still consider Delaware the South, which is strange, but they do, already have very high percentages of black people. And those southern states are is where the black middle class is actually thriving. And in many of the states that black people fled to during the Great Migration are experiencing some of the worst of the racial problems around police killings of unarmed black people. If black people really want power, they can just choose to do what Frederick Douglass says and pray with your legs. Decide if you really want it. Decide if you really want it. I think in 1970s, a writer writes in Playboy magazine, and under a title saying "Takeover of Vermont," and he's writing about an obscure article in the Yale Law Review by two students at Yale, which said to young white hippies, if you really want power, you have to engage in this thing called radical federalism. Take over a state. Take over Vermont. And you know what those young white hippies did? They grabbed their stuff by the tens of thousands and they moved to Vermont, sometimes sleeping in fields and communes and whatever. And they changed Vermont from one of the most conservative states in the Union to now it is literally one of the most liberal states in the Union. And they did that by colonization. They did that by voting with their bodies. This is not without precedent. Some of the early reviews have said, it's a great thought experiment, great food for thought. It's not food for thought. I did not move from New York to Atlanta because I was some food for thought. I had a great life in New York, but I believe so completely in this idea that you can change your reality by taking power in states. Most of the things that you care about, if you are part of the people who are marching for Black Lives Matter, is controlled primarily on a state level. Criminal justice is primarily a state issue. Mass incarceration is primarily a state issue. Health care and health concerns are primarily a state issue. Education of our children is primarily a state issue. If you want power, and if you're tired of just complaining about it, you're tired of just marching about it, if you're tired of always pleading to the powers that be, please recognize me as a full human being. You have the power in you to change that dynamic. I'm going to have several conversations like this with you in the days leading up to the publication of this book and probably after. There's a lot of architecture around publishing books and a lot of events you can go to and sign up to go to. I'm going to talk directly to you. I'm not writing this book for the critics. Like it, don't like it, I don't care what you say. I'm not writing this book for white people to have thought experiments. I hope you do great. I am writing this book to black people to say, do you want power or don't you? Do you want to keep begging or don't you? And if you do not, there is a way around that. And that is what I am now committing my life to illustrating for Black people.
The Devil You Know, Black Power Manifesto. The Devil You Know is a manifesto or call to action. The thing I like about it is an executable plan that is actually doable. It's unlike, and in my opinion, superior to BLM style protests, which can be hit or miss. As far as public perception of whether the protest is worthy or not, or the goals of the protest are worthy or not. BLM, and other protests, actual street protests, tend to be driven by youthful exuberance, which can be volatile due to lack of discipline and or decentralized leadership. And often that decentralized leadership is unaccountable to its actions. BLM, for instance, was co-opted, as a lot of black protests these days are, by what I'll call white grievance piggybacking. Antifa specifically in the case of BLM, but other examples of are civil rights co-option by groups that are feminist or LGBTQ. A lot of the reverse racism, the white fragility sort of arguments. I consider them white and fragile. And black brown coalition building. A lot of times building coalitions can wind up, compromising, some goals that might prove, kind of vital to, the overall purpose of the protest. Specifically about the book, I think it does an excellent job as, number one, a synopsis of the Great Migration, which happened between the world wars, primarily between the world wars, though the official end of it is deemed to be 1970. It notes that 56% currently of the Black American or the legacy Black American population resides in the South, with Texas, Florida, and Georgia being the most populous of blacks. And it also notes something I hadn't thought about before, but there was basically a bifurcation of black culture. During the migration, a lot of kids were left with grandparents, and it kind of skewed the southern portion of black culture towards matriarchy. There were there were big mamas out there, and also the migration was primarily younger but male. So a lot of mothers or grandmothers were left to take care of kids, in hopes of later, I'm sure, sending for the kids and, reuniting nuclear families. So in the North, the population, the people that migrated tended to skew male and younger. And due to that, unfortunately, it had its own problems in that crime rates increased in the North. And as a result, there were kind of a boomerang effect would be the majority population, which was white, felt threatened and passed a lot of laws to deal with the increased crime that young males tend to, that are don't have family responsibilities, young males can run wild. So a lot of those laws were discriminatory. Redlining, types of laws being a good example. Let's see, what else do we have here? Basically, in summary, I recommend the book. It's well written for starters, and mainly because it's a great synopsis of 20th century, early 20th century black culture, the migration, a great migration in particular. It's also a bit of a memoir of the author, Charles Blow, and he has a fairly interesting take on black culture in general. He was a New York Times opinion columnist. I do know that he's moved to Atlanta, basically following his own advice. He's originally from Louisiana. It's also a doable action plan, as I said earlier. This is something that is doable. The other great thing about this action plan is it's something that appeals to older Black Americans. It also can appeal to younger Black Americans. It's not something that is just meant for young people or old people. The advantages of the South: life is a bit cheaper down here, and the weather's a lot better. I personally swore I would never live north of Baltimore ever again. So there's going to be a 10-minute video, or 10-minute or so video, that will end this particular video essay. It's Charles Blow and Don Lemon talking briefly about the book. I think this interview, trying to think of when it was done. I think it was done post-publication. But anyway, in conclusion of my part of this video, please make sure that you hit the like button. Also, feel free to leave comments. I'm kind of interested in what some of you will think about the tenor of the book, and hopefully, those who are really interested will be encouraged to read the book. It's been out for a few years now. I think it's about 5 years old, and I just got around to reading it a month or so ago, and I've been meaning to do a show about it. Also, make sure that you are subscribed to the John Galt Urban Landlord channel. It is mainly where I do the Stanley versus the World show, Monday through Thursdays around 3:45 in the morning. And occasionally there will be a pop-up on the weekend if I have, news to talk about or something like that. And the show itself is mainly just news, politics, culture critique maybe, and just kind of topics of the day. We do have like open panels occasionally, but I try and keep it as structured as possible for my own sanity. So thank you, and following will be that video I just talked about.
So, why'd you move to Atlanta?
So I wrote a book about Black people returning to the South.
Yeah.
For power and consolidation of populations. And in the course of it, I convinced myself that I had to do it too. It made sense to me, not just as a theory, but as a very real thing that was a roadmap for my own life, that on some level it was unpublishable without my own action.
What do you mean unpublishable?
What does it look like for the guy in Brooklyn to tell everybody this?
Okay, got it.
Yeah. So there was that, but there was also, I had really convinced myself in the writing that it was the most powerful thing that I could.
In some way that you have to be in New York, kind of. If you work for the New York Times, if you are a writer, if you're in this media business, that you have to have a connection to New York at least.
Well, I think that, many of the Times columnists do not live in New York, so that is not required. I do believe that the news media business is anchored in New York in a lot of ways, in television and in print, and a lot of the book publishing industry is in New York. So that is very true. Um, but but there is a bigger question to me. Are we going to do things for the rest of it? Are you going to be altruistic
Mm-hmm.
and be in space with other Black people to lift the whole? I remember when I was about to go to college and I had um, a full scholarship from LSU, called me down to Grambling. I was only 20 minutes away, but they called me to come into the office. White man. And he says, I also had a scholarship in Louisiana Tech. He says, LSU doesn't need you. Louisiana Tech doesn't need you. Grambling needs you. For real, what he was saying, as I understood it, was they don't need to inflate their numbers with your account. Where you are needed is among the rest of your peers, that you are going to give to them, but you're going to receive from them by being in community. That it is an altruistic choice. It is not the school with the most advantages for you. He's not making an argument. He was making an argument of sacrifice. You need to come here because we need your intellectual power in this community. I took him up on.
In Grambling.
Yes,
At Grambling.
and it was exactly what he said. I gave, but I received because I was in community with my people, and they gave. I learned culturally things that I would never have learned about Blackness, and it wasn't in a Black studies class. Ironically, very few HBCUs have Black studies majors or even tracks because you're living the experience.
You're right about that. There was a different sort of reasoning when I went to college. It's that my sisters, one went to Grambling, one went to Southern rivals. My mom went to Southern, my uncle went to Grambling, so there was always this rivalry. But it's like, we wanted you. My dad went to Southern, but then got his law degree, I believe. This is way back in the day from LSU. We want you to go to an integrated place.
Yes, I understand that.
But I kind of regret that sometimes because I missed out on the experience that you had.
But there are pros and cons to everything.
Yeah.
Right. There's the idea. For me, what was really powerful was gaining the confidence of never questioning myself in the space. I grew up in a majority Black town, went to an all Black high school, all Black HBCU, all Black college. Every room I walked into, the smartest person in the room was Black.
Yeah.
I never questioned for a minute that every room that I walked into, the smartest person could not be Black, and that could not be me.
Yeah.
Never.
Yeah.
During the course of my journalistic career and interviewing a million different people, met really brilliant Black people. Went to amazing schools, advanced degrees, and they were covered in racial battle scars. Constantly questioning, constantly unsure.
Whether they were good enough or
Good enough.
Black people.
It was the question, the constant trying to perform to justify their
existence.
their seat at the table. And I was like, what are you doing? I didn't understand, like, what is this? Because you're brilliant.
Yeah. I never had that. So I understand what you said. I was always in rooms where black people were brilliant and the smartest people in the room. I knew that one by the time I got to LSU. I knew that because I went to an all black elementary school and all black junior high. My high school wasn't all black. I was tired of Catholic school, so I went to a public school. But I had all the public school black folks. It was great. It was a great experience. But by the time I got to college, I had been around all black people. I lived in an all black neighborhood, which was sort of a W.B. Du Bois talented 10th neighborhood.
Yeah.
I mean, it was literally a Leave It to Beaver neighborhood with a 2-car garage and the sprinklers and whatever.
I can see you
All
do it being
Yeah.
a least favorite.
It was all black folks. It was, people who were engineers or they were professors at Southern University or that kind of thing. And so I was used to being around brilliant black people. I was surprised that the white people were not used to my brilliance and seeing that.
Yes.
And so for them, I was just like, yes, here I am in my beauty, my blackness, and my smartness. And they were always like, oh my God, you're really smart for a black guy. You know what I mean?
How did you receive that?
I knew then. I was just like, yeah, I'm really smart. I said, how about I'm just smarter than you, was my thing.
Right.
And sometimes I just shut up because I knew that they were ignorant, and I just showed them by example about how smart.
See, I don't think I've ever had anyone say to me that I'm.
You've never had someone say you're really good looking for a black man. You're really handsome for a black man.
I don't because I think I would have known that I would have snapped in a crazy way. So I know that I would have remembered it. I don't think that I remember it happening.
Yeah. So that happened to me in college, and by the time I got to the workplace, in the workforce, and it happened to me, it was not surprising to me that kind of thing would happen. And so
No,
it
once-
prepared me for, I believe, the larger workforce.
Listen, I've heard it insinuated in a way,
Yeah.
by a TV producer. He was like, basically saying that I was part of the handsome black person
Yeah.
quotient
Yeah.
of the show. And I was
Yeah.
like, what? Or when I was younger and would go out, and I was going out with a friend who also worked at the Times, and we'd go out to the club, and the promoter would say, oh yes, you're part of my beautiful black people group. And I was like, what? So
A white promoter? A black
he was
promoter?
Russian. He was Russian.
Really? And
Yes. And so I was like, what? Like, it's shocking to hear that that you are playing a role in some curation
yeah.
that someone's doing. That's shocking.
But it's a weird sort of diluted form of I don't want to call it slavery, but you know what I mean? Like, you're performing and I have hired you to do a certain sort of thing. And so it's like Dance Monkey.
Right.
You know what I say?
It's that, but it is also, it also allows for people to continue their racism and stereotype. That there are people who can graduate. I can make exceptions, because the only way that white supremacy works is that it has to have exceptions, because that you have to be able to explain away someone who's brilliant.
Yeah.
You have to be able to explain away someone who exceeds your idea of what beauty is. You have to be able to explain that away. So they make exceptions
Mhm.
so that they can maintain the rule.
Yeah.
And so when you realize that you are the exception that's being used to maintain the rule, the only way that you can be part of the handsome or beautiful black people group that they allow in is that they are keeping the rest of us out.
Right. And the only reason you're there is that you're exceptional. So you get to be
But
there.
it is implicit to
Yeah.
the moment he said that, I will never be back here again.
Yeah.
Because what you are doing is using me to make sure that no one feels like you're being discriminatory. But in fact, you're using me as the rule, as the exception to the rule, which is to keep all of the rest of the people like me out.
Yeah.